Already, February's done, so I'm going to very quickly try and recap everything that's gone on in Moncton and parts of New Brunswick over the last little bit. I'm going to try to touch on topics like tariffs, the general real estate market, the rental market, and everything kind of related to what it's like living in New Brunswick and buying and selling in New Brunswick. Okay, so starting off with the Moncton stats, the sale to new listing ratio for the month of February was 55.4%. This is actually the lowest since 2018, and it's 0.02% higher than 2018. It's a very similar market to back then as far as market temperature is concerned. Months of inventory, 4.6. That is higher than last year by 1.3 months, and it's higher than any other year in the last 5 years minus February of 2020. The average price, however, is still at 364 and the median is at 350. That median price is actually down 1.4% from last February, and I think that 350 is about as close as you can get to a healthy median in Moncton, and I do believe the average will eventually get closer to that median. I would also not be surprised if that median begins to drop, as wages in New Brunswick don't really support a median price above 350K. At least in Moncton. It might be different in Fredericton or St. John, but for sure in Moncton, there are not jobs out there that support a median price above 350. So the sale to list price ratio is exactly what it was last year for the month of February, 97.3%. And it's actually a little bit better than 2023, which was kind of a year in limbo. A lot of times in markets, it's not necessarily the condition of the market, it's how people believe the market is and how they react. There's a lot of behavior that goes into figuring out what's going on in real estate. And sometimes people are a little bit slow to catch on because they don't always know all of these stats. So if they feel that the market is really hot, they're going to keep rushing to bid up the prices over and over again. And if the market's declining, sometimes you'll have the opposite effect and people will shy away from buying even if they see a good deal. Median days on market, 35, pretty standard, a little over a month, very close to what it's been for the last few years, minus 2022, of course, but it's still way better than it was in 2020 and 2018. Now let's go to year to date. So one of the problems with doing statistics for the single month of whether it be January or February is that it's very small. We don't do a lot of volume here in New Brunswick, especially in Moncton. And when you try to compare any of the Atlantic provinces to an area like Ontario or Vancouver, the volume is not really there to actually have meaningful statistics on a single month basis. So year to date, so January and February combined, sales are down 5.6%. New listings are up 17%. Active listings are up 34%. Sale to new listing ratio is down almost 15%. Months of inventory is up by 1.4. Average price is somehow still up 375K from last February, but the median is 350K, which is actually still 6.1% higher than last year. Sale to list price ratio on the year is actually 96.6. So even though February was similar to last year, year to date, it's not been that way. And as we get further in the year, we'll have a better idea of where the market actually is in terms of how much you can negotiate off of a purchase price. Median days on market year to date is way up. It's very similar to what it was in 2023. It's over double what it was in 2022. However, it is still lower than what it was in 2020. But what we're seeing here is the market continuing to shift away from the sellers at the time being towards balanced. And I do believe that we will eventually hit a buyer's market. I don't know if we're going to hit that buyer's market this year, but if we don't hit it this year, I'd be very surprised if we don't hit it next year. Okay, now let's look into northern New Brunswick. So northern New Brunswick, like any area in New Brunswick, is low volume. So again, we are looking at extremely small sample sizes. So a sale to new listing ratio is not overly valuable when you're talking about less than 200 sales and 200 new listings. But I will dive into this. Sales are actually up for the month of February by 11.3% from last year. And again, this is northern New Brunswick, so we're talking about 108 sales. New listings, 153. That's down almost 20%. Active listings are down 7.7%. Sale to new listing ratio is up 20%. Months of inventory, 6.8. Now, if you're not from New Brunswick, you're going to look at that and you're going to think, wow, 6.8, that's brutal. Well, it used to be 17 months of inventory in 2018 and 24 months of inventory in 2015. So 6.8 is pretty good for that area. Average price, 225K, which kind of tells you a little bit about why that sort of market is a little bit hotter. Median price, 204. Sale to list price ratio, 93.8. And median days on market, 73.5. So that's just the month of February. And when you look at year to date, The sales are down 3.5. New listings are actually down 7.7. Sale to new listing ratio is actually up by about 4%. Months of inventory is down slightly from 7.7 to 7.6. The average and median price are both up 18 and 22%, which is quite significant, but small sample size, so it doesn't take a whole lot to skew that. Sale to list price ratio, 94%, and median days on market, 84. So median days on market is going up. And this is one of the problems when you have a cheap market. It often has much more people speculating on it. So you have a lot more volatility, especially in the lower end of it. I don't know where Northern New Brunswick is going to go. It's a very difficult market. If you do buy in Northern New Brunswick, choose a realtor that's very familiar with the area, that has lived there, that's in the community, and has experience. There are quite a few of them to choose from, and I would love to have one on this channel to talk about the area because it's an enigma. Anyways, Fredericton, I'm going to try to go through this one a little bit quick. Fredericton's kind of complicated. It has a lot of government jobs. It does have some forestry jobs, and it has a relatively diverse employment sector. Out of anywhere in New Brunswick, it's probably the safest market, especially being close to Gagetown. As for military jobs, it's quite good, especially if we're going to be increasing our military spending. It's probably one of the safer markets, even if it feels a little bit slow this year, which I'm hearing, even though the statistics don't really show that it's slower this year. I've heard realtors in the area tell me that it feels a little bit slow. Sales activity for the month of February, down 10%. New listings are actually down 14%. Active listings are up 3.6. Sale to new listing ratio is still up 5%. Months of inventory up by 0.4. Average price 350, median 332, and Fredericton median 332. That's probably where Moncton should be. We really should not be that much higher than Fredericton. And I know Fredericton area has cheaper areas around it, like Woodstock. Well, Moncton has a lot of cheaper areas in its surrounding areas too. So I don't necessarily agree that that is enough of a justification for us to be $20,000 apart on our median. Sale to list price ratio is 100%. Median days on market is 26. And one more thing too. This is really important. I can't believe I forgot to mention this. Fredericton is home to two really good universities, and that absolutely does help the employment and the desirability. The downtown is really well developed. It's actually not a bad downtown. As far as the tri-communities, St. John, Fredericton, Moncton goes, it's probably one of the ones that's going to feel most like a university town. Moncton does not really have a conventional university. We have a French university, which is really far away from downtown, about 10-minute drive. And then you have a Christian university all the way in the north end, about 20 to 25 minutes from downtown. So median days on markets in Fredericton, 26. And when you look year to date, I mean, every single statistic in Fredericton year to date is up. New listings, 0.3%. Sale activity, 1.4%. It's one of the more safe markets as far as that sort of thing goes. But again, we are in uncharted territory in this day and age. St. John. So St. John, again, another low volume market, 129 sales, exactly what it was last year. New listings, 158, down 1.2%. Active listings are down 20%. SNLR is down 1.6%. Months of inventory is down from 3.6 to 2.9. The average price, 400K. Again, 129 sales. Probably doesn't take much to skew that. And then the median, 326. Sale to list price ratio, 105. Median days on market, 29. And then when you look at the year to date, kind of the same story. Sales are up 3.7%. New listings are down 10%. Active down 20%. SNLR is up 10%. MOI is down almost a full month. And then median 323. Now, St. John probably has the most upside out of any of the areas in New Brunswick. I believe it being a port city is huge. Even if you can't export the way you would want to the US right now, I still think it has a lot of upside. I also find the value proposition is pretty good. There's kind of just been this long-standing joke as long as I've been alive in New Brunswick where people just dunk on St. John, and really, St. John is not really worse than anywhere else in New Brunswick. It probably gets dunked on too much at this point, and if you've been to St. John in the uptown area, it's actually pretty well developed. It's pretty nice. Some of the best condos in the province by far, and it really does feel like a real city, which a lot of areas in New Brunswick don't feel like a real city. It's a small province. Of course, we don't really have the population or infrastructure to compete with large cities, but that is about as close as you can get. Kind of feels like a mini Halifax. Alrighty, so the economic situation in New Brunswick is a little bit tricky right now. There are about 6,000 jobs that are at risk due to tariffs. My personal opinion is that I don't believe these tariffs are going to be around for that long. This might be an on and off again negotiation tactic, and this could be something that really kind of causes instability over the next year. Something to keep in mind, though, is these tariffs are also affecting the U.S. economy, and it's causing the bond yields to drop in both the U.S. and Canada, which means fixed rate borrowing should theoretically become a lot more attractive. And if the U.S. dollar devalues and becomes unpopular, what you also might see is more flexibility for our central banks to cut rates, which is about as good as you can expect. Because if we are able to cut rates a little bit on the short-term lending, and if we're also able to have relatively low bond yields for fixed rate borrowing, that could really, really help us out in a crucial time where we have a lot of people that are going to be renewing mortgages over the next 24, 48 months. So a couple of things that, if you live in New Brunswick, you've heard this, that are really beginning to affect us are the power rates. Energy costs are going to go up again on April 1st, and it will have represented a 23% increase in 24 months as of April 1st. This is something that we literally cannot afford. I don't live in a big house. I had two back-to-back $770 power bills, and I know a lot of people who have had worse power bills than that. Property taxes too. This is something that people should really, really keep an eye on. I always tell my buyers, when you're looking at a home, keep in mind, if this home was purchased more than 2 or 3 years ago, the property taxes that you are seeing, the actual amount, both the assessment and the levy, are going to be very different than what you get when you buy it. And you're seeing this a lot. You're seeing a lot of people post this. We are in the season where they start to send out the tax bills. People are posting saying, hey, my assessment has gone up $200,000 in 3 years, and now my taxes are incredibly expensive. I've even seen people have their taxes double because the previous owners had lived there so long that the assessment was so low, and now that they've bought it, the assessment's much higher. So you got to be really careful about that as a buyer. So what is the Bank of Canada going to do? In their last speech, they said that there is not going to be a COVID type response, which means we are not going to see us buying our own bonds. We're not going to see fixed rate borrowing go down to, 1.5, 2% rates. We're not going to see short-term lending go all the way down to, a 0 or 1% policy rate. So we don't really know what they're going to do, but we do know it's not going to be a COVID type response. And fortunately for us, it might not have to be. Obviously, employment data is going to be really significant. If we do lose 6,000 jobs, that will push New Brunswick up to about 8% unemployment. And that could, of course, have very significant impacts on the economy and the real estate market. All right, so a little bit of a recap here. I don't think the prices in Moncton can really support a median above 350K. And I think really it should be close to 330, 340. But inflation kind of makes that hard to predict because it's like goalposts are moving on me as I'm trying to make these predictions, forecasts. Nobody has a crystal ball, not me. And also not the people who are telling you that real estate's going to go to the moon and rate cuts are going to go down to 0. Nobody knows what's going to happen, okay? So it's not just me, it's also them. Now, another interesting thing is that the rental market is not just softening in the big cities. It certainly appears to be softening here. If you're anywhere on social media or in these circles, you're going to see a huge increase in rental listings that are offering discounts. So this is how this works. Every 1 month of free rents on a apartment building works out roughly to an 8% discount on the price. Now, they can't just drop the price 8% because a lot of times you need to have cash flow in order to get financing for new projects. And it also really could affect the appraisals of other upcoming new and existing units if you drop the rents too much. So what I think will happen is the big developers who have nice buildings will be able to stomach the loss as long as it takes. And I think a lot of the amateur landlords who maybe don't understand what a cap rate is or were just gambling and hoping the house would go up forever, I don't think that they're going to be able to hold on that long. And we're actually starting to see a lot of these amateur landlords listing their properties, and the cap rates on these things are abysmal. I mean, why would you even look at anything in Moncton, New Brunswick with a cap rate under 5%? Moncton has not historically had ROI on an annual basis that allowed for cap rates to be as low as they are in some other parts of the world. So you really do need that cash flow, and you need it to be based off of sustainable long-term tenants. A lot of times you look at these cash flow statements and they don't make sense. I don't care how well renovated an old 1970s unit on a bad street is, you're not going to get consistently $1,700 a month for it when you can get a brand new building downtown for less. It's just not going to happen on any sort of a consistent basis. So, how to prepare as a buyer? Be patient, be disciplined, make sure your decisions are based off of real data, and don't try to time the market, but also don't rush to catch a falling knife. Don't take on too much debt and be intentional with your debt. As a seller, it might just take longer to sell your house. Ultimately, you're going to get a way better price now than you were 2 years ago or 3 years ago in the really hot markets we had. So it might take a little bit longer, but you're going to wind up with a much better price than you were in the past. As a homeowner, if you're planning to stay put, it's something you should consider because, first of all, if you're benefiting from tax hike protection, there's not a huge incentive for you to sell and then buy another house. So I would definitely recommend considering refinancing if the rates are anywhere in the range that your mortgage broker or lender or bank tells you is sustainable. I can't really comment on that. I have my beliefs, but I'm a realtor. I am not an economist. I am not a mortgage specialist. So get good advice on that and make your decision based off that advice. As a renter, this rental market appears to be softening. So you might not be able to negotiate huge amounts off your rent, but you can afford to be a little bit more picky and choosy. You can really afford to kind of look. You don't have to rush and sign the first thing that you see. Rentals.ca is not super popular here yet, but I love the platform and I think it's the future for rents. So definitely check out rentals.ca. Look around, be really, really cautious.